Hello and welcome. Tonight, we are leaving our world behind. We're not traveling to the Wild West of Hollywood, a place of clear heroes, dramatic showdowns at high noon, and clean, starlit nights around a campfire. No, tonight we are diving into the real thing, the gritty, the dangerous, the unforgiving reality of the American frontier in the 1870s, a place where survival was never, ever guaranteed. You might imagine yourself tough enough to handle it, but as we will soon discover, there is a very good reason they called it wild. Before we begin our journey, if you find a little comfort in these stories, a quick like or a subscribe helps our small community more than you know. And I'm always so curious to learn where you are all listening from. If you feel so inclined, drop a comment with your location and the time. It's a wonderful thing to see how these stories connect us all across the globe. Now, find a comfortable position, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, gentle hum, and allow your breathing to slow. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let us explore why any of us would likely not survive even a single day in the untamed American frontier. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the American Wild West of the 1870s. The good news is that you are about to experience a legendary chapter of history firsthand. The bad news is that your chances of survival have just dropped dramatically. The first challenge hits you before you even open your eyes. It's the smell. Not the earthy, pleasant aroma of pine and damp soil you might expect, but something far more pungent. A thick, heavy stench, a mixture of unwashed bodies, animal droppings, and what you can only assume is raw sewage hanging in the very air you breathe. You see, bathing wasn't a priority here. For most settlers, a thorough wash was a monthly luxury, and that's being generous. Some would go entire winters without a proper bath. Water was life. It was for drinking, for cooking, for livestock. To use it on your own body was seen as a profound waste. As you drag yourself from your bed, which is likely just a straw-filled sack, crawling with unseen companions like bedbugs, you feel how every single muscle in your body aches. Life on the 1870s frontier was a life of constant, grinding physical labor, from the moment the sun rose until long after it set. There were no weekends off, no paid vacations, and certainly no ergonomic considerations. Whether you were a farmer, a miner, or a ranch hand, your body was your primary tool, and you used it until it broke down. You might think you work hard in your modern life, but this was something else entirely, a back-breaking existence that left even the strongest people permanently hunched and arthritic by their 30s. 14 hours a day, plowing stubborn fields, hauling heavy buckets of water for miles, chopping an endless supply of wood, or working deep underground in the suffocating dark of a mine shaft. It is no wonder that the average lifespan was only about 35 years. Standing on the dusty, splintered floor, you notice the chill. If it's winter, your cabin might be 20 degrees below freezing inside. The fire and the hearth would have been allowed to die down overnight to save precious, hard-won fuel. There is no central heating to find, no thermal underwear in this century. And if it's summer, well, prepare to sweat through every single article of clothing you own. There was no air conditioning, no escape from the oppressive, relentless heat. The elements were not something you observed from behind a window. They were a constant, invasive presence in your life. Speaking of clothing, forget comfort. As a man, you might own 2 sets of clothes, rough canvas or denim pants that chafe your skin raw, and a coarse cotton shirt that feels like sandpaper. For a woman, the situation was even dire. Multiple layers were worn regardless of the temperature. A chemise, a tightly laced corset restricting your breath, multiple petticoats, and a long, heavy dress that dragged in the dirt and filth of the streets. Everything was scratchy, ill-fitting, and rarely, if ever, properly cleaned. Those fancy tailored outfits from the westerns, pure fiction for the average person. Your stomach growls, a hollow ache reminding you it's time for breakfast. I hope you like beans, biscuits, and coffee, because you might be having it for every single meal. The Wild West diet was brutally monotonous and deeply nutritionally deficient. Fresh fruits and vegetables were a rare, seasonal luxury. Meat, when you could get it, was often preserved with so much salt or smoke that its original flavor was a distant memory. Refrigeration did not exist. Scurvy, the dreaded disease of vitamin C deficiency, the one that makes your gums bleed and your teeth fall from your head, was shockingly common among settlers. A condition easily prevented with an orange, but oranges were a world away. You might think the coffee, at least, would be good. Cowboys always seem to have a pot brewing in the movies, but what you're served barely resembles the coffee you know. It's been boiled to within an inch of its life, bitter beyond belief. Sometimes crushed eggshells or even a pinch of salt were added, not for flavor, but in a desperate attempt to cut the aggressive bitterness. Still, the caffeine is a necessary jolt to face the day, so you drink it without complaint. Before heading outside, a crucial ritual. You must check your shoes. Check them for scorpions, spiders, or even small snakes that might have sought shelter there during the night. It wasn't an act of paranoia. It was a simple habit, born of the painful and sometimes fatal experience of those who forgot. One wrong move, one moment of carelessness, and you could be facing a venomous bite, miles and miles from anything resembling medical help. Stepping outside your cabin, the vastness of the landscape is breathtaking, but also terrifying. You are completely exposed. Extreme weather could materialize with almost no warning. A blizzard, a tornado, a flash flood, or a searing drought could all mean death for the unprepared. But let's say you've settled in a frontier town. You might think civilization offers some protection, and in some ways it does. In others, it just presents a different, more concentrated set of dangers. These towns were hotbeds of disease. Without proper sewage systems or any understanding of germ theory, illnesses spread like wildfire. Cholera, typhoid, smallpox, diphtheria, tuberculosis. These were constant, terrifying threats. A single outbreak could tear through a community, wiping out half the town in a matter of weeks.
The streets themselves are not paved. They are dirt tracks that transform into sucking mud pits when it rains and choking dust bowls when it's dry. And the smell you noticed earlier, it's stronger here. Horse manure is everywhere, sometimes knee-deep in the most heavily trafficked areas. Flies swarm around you in a buzzing cloud, and you suddenly understand, with perfect clarity, why disease was a constant companion. As you walk down the main street, you pass the saloon. It is likely the busiest establishment in town, but it is not the glamorous place of Hollywood. Most were crude one-room shacks with basic, rough-hewn furniture. And the liquor they served wasn't fine whiskey aged in oak barrels. It was often raw, potent alcohol, sometimes mixed with tobacco juice, pepper, turpentine, or even gunpowder to give it an extra kick. A single drink of this concoction could blind you if you were unlucky. This saloon represents another deadly aspect of frontier life: violence. These places were the frequent sites of deadly confrontations, not because of formal duels or heroic showdowns, but because of drunken, foolish arguments that escalated with terrifying speed in a society where nearly everyone was armed. The romanticized gunfights of the movies, they were exceedingly rare. Most violence was impulsive, messy, and fought over trivial matters. You'll notice that almost everyone carries a weapon, but not always for the reasons you might think. While self-protection was a factor, weapons were primarily tools. Tools for hunting for food, for protection from wildlife like bears, wolves, and cougars, and sometimes for signaling. To go unarmed, especially when traveling between settlements, was considered foolish. But you might be surprised to learn that many of these lawless towns actually had strict gun control laws. Places like Dodge City, Kansas, and Tombstone, Arizona, required visitors to surrender their firearms upon entering the town limits. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral actually started because the Clanton gang refused to comply with Tombstone's weapons ordinance. The quick-draw duel in the middle of the street at high noon is almost entirely a Hollywood invention. Real frontier violence was sudden, chaotic, and utterly lacking in any sense of honor or fairness. It was far more likely to be an ambush or a shooting in the back during a robbery. You continue your walk and pass the local doctor's office. The medical care of the 1870s frontier would horrify you. Most doctors had little to no formal training. Surgical procedures were performed without anesthesia, beyond a swig of whiskey or a dose of morphine. And sterilization was a completely unknown concept. Something as simple as an infected cut, a splinter that festered, could easily lead to amputation or death. Common treatments included bloodletting, mercury compounds, arsenic, and other toxic substances that often did far more harm than good. Women in childbirth faced mortality rates as high as 1 in 4 in remote areas. Dentistry involved yanking teeth with crude pliers without any anesthetic. Most people simply suffered from painful dental problems for years until their teeth rotted away completely. If you were injured or fell ill on the frontier, your survival often depended more on luck than on medical intervention. The phrase, "only the strong survive," was not a metaphor. It was a literal, daily reality. As the afternoon wears on, you notice those dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Weather on the frontier wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a deadly force. Without modern forecasting, storms arrived with little warning. Blizzards could strand travelers for days, leading to a slow, freezing death. Tornadoes could obliterate an entire community in minutes, with no emergency services to help the survivors. Flash floods could wash away wagon trains, and long droughts could ruin crops and lead to starvation. Your hastily built sod house or log cabin provided minimal protection. The roof leaks, the wind howls through the gaps in the walls, winter temperatures inside could drop below freezing, and summer heat was often unbearable. There was no true shelter from the relentless power of the wild. Perhaps you decide to leave this town, to journey further west, chasing a dream of land or gold. You've joined a wagon train on the famous Oregon Trail. This 2,000-mile journey was one of the most perilous undertakings of the 19th century. Of the 400,000 people who attempted it, an estimated 1 in 10 did not survive. The Oregon Trail was sometimes called the nation's longest graveyard. Historians estimate an average of 10 to 15 people died for every single mile of the trail. Think about that. A grave every few hundred feet for 2,000 miles. The trail was lined with makeshift crosses and simple stone markers, a silent testament to the immense human cost of Western expansion. Disease was the #1 killer. Cholera spread through contaminated water was particularly devastating. A person could be healthy at breakfast and dead by dinner. River crossings were another deadly challenge. Wagons frequently capsized, drowning people and livestock and destroying all their worldly possessions. And contrary to the movies, the biggest threat of violence wasn't from Native Americans. It was from accidents. Being crushed by wagon wheels, accidental gunshot wounds, or being kicked by a spooked mule. The psychological toll was immense. Families buried their children, parents, and spouses in shallow graves along the trail and then had to keep moving immediately. There was no time for grief. To delay was to risk being trapped in the mountains by winter snows, a fate that could be even worse. As you travel, you notice something the movies often get wrong: the stunning diversity of the people. The Wild West wasn't populated solely by white settlers. It was a meeting ground of cultures from all over the world. Chinese immigrants built the railroads. Black cowboys made up as much as a quarter of the workforce on some ranches. Mexican families had lived in the Southwest for generations before it was part of the United States. And of course, dozens of distinct Native American nations had called these lands home for thousands of years. But this diversity did not mean harmony. It was a place of deep and often violent racial prejudice. And for Native Americans, the expansion of white settlement was nothing short of catastrophic. The deliberate destruction of the buffalo herds, the broken treaties, the forced relocation to barren reservations, and the horrific boarding schools designed to kill the Indian and save the man, it all amounted to a systematic attempt to destroy entire cultures. The romanticized cowboys and Indians narrative is a cruel simplification of a tragic and complex history. Women on the frontier were also far from the helpless damsels of fiction. They performed incredibly demanding physical labor, working in the fields, tending livestock, and defending the homestead, all while managing the household, raising children, and navigating a society that gave them few legal rights. Their work was relentless and absolutely essential for survival. By the late 1870s and 1880s, the West was changing. The arrival of the railroad was the beginning of the end for the wild frontier. It brought corporate interests, industrial mining, and large-scale ranching that squeezed out the small, independent operator. It brought lawyers, bankers, and formal governments that replaced vigilante justice with structured law. The iconic gunfighters and outlaws operated in a very specific window of time, a transition period when the old ways of personal justice clashed with the new systems of organized law. And just as the real frontier was disappearing, the myth was being born. Buffalo Cody's Wild West shows began touring the East, presenting a sanitized, theatrical version of the frontier. Dime novels, written by authors who had never been West, created the archetypal archetypes of the noble cowboy and the dastardly villain. This myth served a purpose. It created a simple, reassuring story about American identity, about courage, self-reliance, and the triumph of civilization. But it was a story that left out the most important truths. It left out the genocide of indigenous peoples, the exploitation of labor, the environmental devastation, and the daily grinding hardship that was the true reality for most. As your time in the Wild West comes to an end, you reflect on what you've seen. You understand now why survival was such a monumental achievement. The real story of the West wasn't found in gunfights or gold strikes, but in the quiet, daily struggles of ordinary people. It was in the resilience of a woman maintaining a home in a sod hut. It was in the cooperation of neighbors raising a barn together. It was in the enduring spirit of cultures that refused to be erased. It was in the simple, profound act of waking up each morning and facing another day of overwhelming challenges and choosing to carry on. The real Wild West, stripped of all its romance, is a testament to human endurance, a story of hardship, of loss, and of the incredible strength of the human spirit in the face of a world that was truly untamed. And now, as the stars wheel overhead, the same stars that watched over the pioneers, the cowboys, and the tribes, allow the silence of that vast, empty land to settle over you. Let the story fade, and let the quiet of the night guide you toward a deep and peaceful sleep.